It is around the year 336 before the Common Era in the Greek city of Corinth. The most powerful young man in the world has come to town, Alexander, king of Macedon, who is about to set out to conquer the largest empire on earth. Everyone of importance comes to pay him their respects. One man does not. So Alexander goes to find him. He discovers a ragged old philosopher lying in the sun beside a large ceramic jar, owning nothing, wanting nothing. The conqueror stands over him and offers him anything, anything at all that he might desire. And the old man in the dirt looks up at the master of the world and says, "Yes, you can stand a little to one side. You are blocking my sun." Alexander's stunned companions laughed, but Alexander did not laugh. He is reported to have said quietly as he walked away, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." His name is Diogenes. History calls him Diogenes of Sinope, after the city of his birth, a Greek trading colony on the southern coast of the Black Sea. He was born around the year 412 before the Common Era, and he would live to be very old. And he is, of every figure this channel has ever studied, the strangest, the most extreme, and in some ways the most uncomfortable. He was a philosopher of the school called the Cynics, and we will come back to that word because it does not mean what it has come to mean. He left no books that survive. What we have of him is a great cloud of stories, vivid, shocking, often very funny anecdotes, collected centuries later. Some are surely invented, but as with Cato, the Greeks told a particular kind of story about Diogenes for a particular reason, and the reason is the whole subject of this episode. His life did not begin in the marketplace. The sources say his father was a banker or an official connected with the city's coinage in Sinope, and that the young Diogenes was involved in a scandal. The story, in its usual form, is that Diogenes or his father, or the two together, defaced the currency of the city, tampered with the coinage, adulterated the money. And whatever exactly happened, the result is clear. Diogenes was exiled from Sinope, driven out, and made a wanderer. But here is the detail that the ancient writers and Diogenes himself treated as almost prophetic. There was an oracle involved in the story, and the instruction attributed to it used a phrase that in Greek has a double meaning. It could mean deface the currency, and it could also mean deface the customs. Overturn the conventions, falsify the false coin of accepted values. Diogenes took the second meaning as the mission of his entire life. He had been thrown out of a city for tampering with its coins. He decided he would spend the rest of his days tampering with something far larger, the counterfeit values of human society itself. So Diogenes came to Athens and later to Corinth, and he began the most radical philosophical experiment ever actually performed with a human life. He decided to find out by direct demonstration on his own body exactly how little a human being truly needs and how much of what we chase is counterfeit coin. He gave away or abandoned nearly everything. He had a rough cloak, which he wore in all weather and slept in. He had a wooden staff. He had a leather bag for the little food he had. And famously, for his shelter, he did not have a house. He took up residence in a large ceramic storage jar, a pithos. In a public part of Athens, people have called it a barrel. It was really a great clay vessel, the kind used to store grain or wine. He lived in it, in the marketplace, in full public view. There is a story that he once owned one last possession beyond the bare minimum, a simple wooden cup to drink from. And that one day he saw a child drinking water from its cupped hands, and Diogenes threw the cup away, saying a child had beaten him in simplicity. He was quite deliberately conducting an experiment in subtraction, and he was conducting it in public on purpose so that the whole city would have to watch. To understand why a sane and brilliant man chose to live in a clay jar, you have to understand the specific thing Diogenes believed he was fighting. And it is the thing this episode is built around. Diogenes believed that the chief source of human misery, the great hidden tyranny under which nearly every person lives their entire life, is wanting, desire. The endless, restless, manufactured craving for things we have been taught to need but do not. He looked at the people of Athens, wealthy, sophisticated, the most advanced society of its age, and he did not see free people. He saw people in chains, and the chains, he believed, were forged out of their own desires. Think through the logic of it, because it is sharper than it first appears. Every single thing you want that you do not have is in that exact moment a small unhappiness, a small lack, a small open wound of dissatisfaction. And everything you want that lies in someone else's power to grant or withhold is, in that exact moment, a thread that hands a piece of your peace to another person. Diogenes saw a whole city of people who had been carefully taught by custom and by status competition to want an enormous number of things, bigger houses, finer clothes, higher reputation, more luxury, the next acquisition, and who were therefore walking around permanently lacking, permanently wounded, permanently dependent on 100 external things and 100 other people's opinions. And the cruelest part of the trap, as Diogenes saw it, is that satisfying a want does not end the wanting. It just promotes you to the next want. The man who gets the bigger house immediately wants the furnishings. The man who gets the furnishings wants the recognition. The wanting is a treadmill, and the treadmill never stops. And the people on it have mistaken the running for living. And so Diogenes reasoned his way to a radical conclusion. And then this is what makes him Diogenes. He actually did it. He reasoned, if wanting is the chain, then freedom is not getting everything you want. That is impossible. And anyway, it does not work because the wants regenerate. Freedom is needing almost nothing in the first place. If you genuinely do not want the bigger house, no one can make you unhappy by denying it to you. If you genuinely do not crave a fine reputation, no one holds that lever over you. If you have reduced your true needs down to almost nothing, to sun, to simple food, to water, to a cloak, to your own thoughts, then you have pulled almost every thread of dependency out of other people's hands. You become, in a strange and total way, unconquerable. Not because you are powerful, but because there is almost nothing left in you for any power to grip. This is what the jar was. This is what the thrown away cup was. Diogenes was systematically, publicly, deliberately reducing the surface area by which the world could hold him, until there was almost nothing left to hold. Let me make this concrete, because the tyranny of wanting is not an ancient problem. It is, if anything, far more intense now than in the Agora of Athens. You live in a world that has built an entire vast economy on the deliberate scientific manufacture of wanting. Every screen you look at, much of the day, is engineered to make you want something you were not a moment before, lacking. Diogenes' diagnosis lands on the modern person with uncomfortable precision. Count, honestly, how many of your wants in a given day are genuinely yours, arising from a real need of your actual life, and how many were installed in you deliberately by someone with something to sell, the newer thing, the better version, the status marker, the upgrade. And notice what each one does. Each one converts a moment in which you were fine, in which you had enough, into a moment of lack. The wanting machine's whole business is the manufacture of dissatisfaction in people who, a moment before, were content. Diogenes is not telling you to throw away your possessions and move into a barrel. We will come to what he is and is not saying, but he is asking you a question the modern world spends billions of dollars to stop you from asking. How many of the things you are restlessly chasing do you actually want? And how many are simply counterfeit coin pressed into your hand by someone who profits from your sense of lack? Every want you can identify as counterfeit and set down is a thread cut, is a small piece of your piece taken back out of someone else's hand. Now, I have to deal with the word because the word has been almost completely inverted, and the inversion hides what Diogenes actually was. Diogenes was the most famous of the cynics, and when we say cynic today, we mean something specific and unattractive, a sour, distrustful person who believes everyone is selfish, who sneers at idealism, who assumes the worst about every motive. That is not what the ancient word meant, not at all. The Greek word kainikos means literally dog-like, dog. The cynics were called the dog philosophers. And it began probably as an insult, a comment on Diogenes living outdoors, eating in public, ignoring shame and convention like a stray. But Diogenes characteristically seized the insult and wore it as a badge. Yes, he said in effect, a dog, exactly. Because look at what Diogenes claimed to admire in a dog. A dog, he pointed out, lives entirely in the present. A dog is not anxious about its reputation. A dog does not pretend, does not flatter, does not perform a false self for social advantage. A dog is shameless in the specific sense that it does not perform shame, it does not feel. A dog needs very little to be content: food, warmth, rest, simple things. And when it has those simple things, it is genuinely, completely satisfied with none of the human treadmill of wanting more. A dog, in other words, lives by nature, by what is actually needed, and not by counterfeit convention. And that, Diogenes said, is precisely the point. The dog is free of nearly every chain the human being voluntarily wears. So cynicism, in its true and original meaning, was not sourness. It was the opposite. It was a philosophy of radical naturalness, of stripping away the counterfeit, the performed, the conventional, and living according to what a human being genuinely actually needs. And this is where it matters enormously for this channel, because Diogenes the dog philosopher is not a side figure to the Stoic tradition. He is, in a real and traceable sense, its grandfather. Remember Zeno, the shipwrecked merchant from our last episode who founded Stoicism. When Zeno washed up in Athens and asked the bookseller where he could find a true philosopher, the man he was eventually directed toward and studied under was a cynic named Crates. And Crates was the most famous student of Diogenes. So the line is direct. Diogenes taught Crates. Crates taught Zeno. Zeno founded Stoicism. The whole magnificent structure this channel has explored. Marcus in his tent, Epictetus, and his dividing line, Seneca. The consolation of Boethius. All of it grows from a root, and the root is partly the ragged old man in the clay jar. The Stoics, in a sense, took Diogenes' insight and made it livable. Diogenes said, want almost nothing, own almost nothing, and you are free. The Stoics agreed with the principle, but softened the practice. They said, you may keep your house and your cloak and your role in the world. You need not move into a jar. But you must hold all of it the way Diogenes held his almost nothing, lightly as preferred but not needed, as alone and never a chain. Diogenes was the extreme. The Stoics were the extreme made wise, made sustainable, made possible for an ordinary life. But the heart of it, that wanting is the chain, and freedom from wanting is the key. That was Diogenes' discovery first. So now we return to the scene we began with, the most famous of all the Diogenes stories, because now we can see what it actually means. Alexander of Macedon, around the year 336 in Corinth. Alexander is roughly 20 years old. He has just been confirmed as the leader of the Greek world, and he is about to launch the campaign that will, in a single short lifetime, conquer the Persian Empire and carry Greek power to the edge of India. He is, or is about to become, the most powerful human being alive. And the famous, learned, scandalous philosopher Diogenes is in Corinth. And Alexander, young, curious, genuinely drawn to philosophy, wants to meet him. The story says all the city's notables had streamed to Alexander. Diogenes did not bother, so Alexander, remarkably, went to Diogenes. And he found the old man lying in the sun beside his jar, doing nothing, owning nothing. Now look very carefully at the encounter, because every detail of it is a lesson. Alexander stands over Diogenes, and Alexander, generous in the way the powerful enjoy being generous, makes the offer. Ask me for anything you wish, he says. Anything at all. Understand the full weight of that offer. The most powerful man on earth has just opened to a penniless old man in the dirt, unlimited credit, wealth beyond counting. A house, an estate, a position, restored citizenship, honor, comfort, security, anything a human being could possibly want, Alexander could in that moment. Simply grant. It is the second column itself, the entire wheel of fortune, being offered freely by the one man with the power to give it. And Diogenes looks up from the dirt and asks the master of the world to move, because the conqueror's shadow is the one thing at that moment coming between Diogenes and the warmth of the sun. Stand a little to one side. You are blocking my light. That sentence is one of the great moments in the history of human freedom. And I want to be precise about why. Diogenes was not being merely rude. And he was not being witty for its own sake. He was delivering in a single line the entire content of his philosophy. And he was delivering it to the one person on earth who most needed to hear it. What Diogenes demonstrated in that instant is that Alexander's enormous power, the power that terrified empires, had no purchase on him at all. And it had no purchase for one precise reason. Alexander's power was entirely a power to give and to withhold things in the second column. That is what the power of even the greatest conqueror ultimately is, the ability to grant your wants, or to deny them, or to take from you what you have. And Diogenes had spent his whole life on a single project, the elimination of his own wants. He had reduced what he needed down to sunlight and simple food, and his own thoughts, things Alexander's gift, could not improve, and Alexander's armies could not meaningfully threaten. So when Alexander offered him anything, Alexander was offering keys to locks that Diogenes no longer had. The conqueror's unlimited credit was worthless here, because the old man in the dirt had no debts of desire for it to pay. And the only thing Diogenes actually wanted in that moment, the sun on his skin, was the one thing the master of the world was, by simply standing there, taking away. It was the most elegant possible proof of his entire life's argument. The man who wants nothing cannot be bought, and the man who wants nothing cannot, in any way that finally matters, be ruled. So let us state carefully what Diogenes was actually claiming, because his life is so extreme that it is very easy to take the wrong lesson from it. The wrong lesson is the literal one. The wrong lesson is possessions are evil. You should give everything away. Comfort is corruption. And the truly wise life is the life in the barrel. That is not, in the end, what even the ancients took from Diogenes, and it is certainly not what the Stoic tradition that grew from him took. The Stoics explicitly kept their houses and their cloaks. So we have to find the real claim, the transferable claim. underneath the dramatic and deliberately provocative life. And here is the real claim, as precisely as I can put it. Diogenes was not fundamentally making a claim about possessions. He was making a claim about attachment, about wanting, about dependency. The jar, the thrown away cup, the single cloak, these were not the teaching. They were the demonstration. They were Diogenes turning the volume of his argument all the way up so that a whole city could not fail to hear it. The actual teaching is not own nothing. The actual teaching is examine ruthlessly what you want. And notice how much of your peace, your freedom, your very sense of being all right, you have made conditional on getting and keeping things that are not, in fact, up to you. Diogenes proved the principle by living at the extreme, but the principle itself scales down, and it scales down to you. You do not have to give away your house to ask the Diogenes question about it. The question is not, do I own this? The question is, does this own me? Could I lose this and still be fundamentally all right? Or have I quietly made my okayness depend on it? Is this thing a tool I use held lightly, or is it a thread by which the world holds me? And this is exactly the dividing line again. This whole channel's single recurring discovery. But Diogenes shows us a particular and crucial face of it. The Stoics generally framed the line in terms of acceptance. The second column is not up to you. So when it goes against you, accept it with equanimity. Diogenes adds something sharper, and earlier in the chain he says, do not wait until the second column thing is taken from you to deal with it. Deal with it now while you still have it by examining your desire for it, by loosening your grip in advance, by practicing wanting it less. Because here is Diogenes' insight in its purest form. The pain of losing something is directly proportional to how much you wanted it, to how much you had attached your well-being to it, and wanting, unlike loss, is happening right now today, and is therefore something you can actually work on right now today. You cannot always prevent loss, but you can, starting immediately, audit and reduce the wanting that determines how much a loss will cost you. Diogenes moved into the jar to demonstrate the furthest extreme of that work. But the work itself, the daily, deliberate loosening of your grip on things you do not truly need, that work can be done by anyone, in any life, without ever going near a barrel. He wanted nothing, and so the world could not hurt him and could not rule him. You will never want nothing. You are a person with a life and people in it, and you should not want nothing. But every unnecessary want you can identify and set down moves you by exactly that much in the direction the old man in the jar was pointing, toward a self with fewer threads for the world to pull. And now I must put the hard question to Diogenes, because his life invites a serious objection. Isn't this, in the end, a philosophy of running away? Diogenes contributed nothing, built nothing, raised no family, held no office, did no work, helped no one in any practical way. He lived off the scraps of a society he refused to participate in, and he called his withdrawal freedom. Isn't want nothing, need nothing, depend on no one just an elaborate justification for opting out of every human responsibility? It is a real objection, and it is the precise reason this channel honors the Stoics who came after Diogenes more than it honors Diogenes himself. And here is the honest answer. Yes, taken as a total way of life, Diogenes' path is a kind of withdrawal, and it has a real cost. A life that needs no one also, very often, gives to no one. The man who has cut every thread has also cut the threads of love, of contribution, of belonging. And those threads are not only chains, they are also the best things in a human life. This is exactly the correction the Stoics made. They took Diogenes' core insight. That wanting is the chain. And they refused his conclusion that you must therefore cut every thread. Instead, they said, stay in the world, keep your house, your work, your family, your roles, love people fully, contribute, but hold all of it the way Diogenes held his sunlight. As something genuinely good, genuinely enjoyed, and yet not the foundation of you preferred, but not needed, held with an open hand. So Diogenes is not, finally, a model to copy whole. He is a corrective to keep in view. He is the extreme that shows you the principle in its purest form. And the principle, once you have seen it clearly in him, you then bring back in moderation into a full and connected and responsible life. Do not move into the jar, but never forget the man who did, because he proved with his own body in front of a conqueror exactly where the chains are and exactly what it costs to wear them. So how does a person actually use this without giving away their belongings, without moving into a jar? Because Diogenes taken literally is impossible for almost everyone and was meant to be. But Diogenes taken correctly, as the man who showed us where the chains are, offers a practice, and it is concrete, and it begins on an ordinary day. First, run the desire audit. Diogenes' whole life began with examining the counterfeit coinage of values. So examine yours, take an ordinary day and notice deliberately the wants that move through you, the urges to acquire, to upgrade, to be seen a certain way, to have the thing. And for each one, ask Diogenes 2 questions. 1, is this want actually mine, arising from a real need of my real life? Or was it installed in me by someone with something to sell, by comparison, by status, by a screen? 2, if I never satisfy this want, am I genuinely worse off in any way that matters? Or do I merely feel a lack that was manufactured a moment ago? You will find, if you are honest, that a large fraction of your wanting is counterfeit coin, and simply seeing a want clearly as counterfeit drains most of its power. You do not have to fight a desire you have genuinely recognized as fake. It just quietly loosens its grip. 2nd, practice voluntary discomfort in small, deliberate doses. This is a practice the Stoics took directly from the Cynic tradition, from Diogenes. They recommended periodically and on purpose choosing a small hardship you could easily avoid. Eat plain, simple food for a while when you could eat richly. Be cold when you could be warm. Go without a comfort or a convenience you normally lean on. Take the harder, simpler option when the easy one is available. And the point of this is not self-punishment. Diogenes was not a masochist, and neither were the Stoics. The point is twofold, and it is precise. First, it teaches you directly in your own body that the discomfort you fear is almost always far smaller than you imagined, that you can be cold or hungry or without your comforts and be completely fine. And second, it loosens the grip of those comforts before fortune can ever use them against you. A person who has voluntarily practiced going without is a person the loss of those things can no longer terrorize. You have already visited the feared place on your own terms and found it survivable. The thread has been pre-loosened. And third, locate your sunlight. This is the gentlest and perhaps the most important lesson of the whole encounter with Alexander. Notice that Diogenes did, in fact, want something. He was not a man of zero desire. He wanted the sun on his skin. But look at what kind of want that was. It was a want for something freely available, something that cost nothing, something no one needed to grant him and no rival could compete for. A simple, natural, unconquerable pleasure. Diogenes had not killed desire. He had relocated it. He had moved his wanting off the expensive, contested dependency, creating things and onto the free and simple and abundant ones. So find your sunlight, find the genuine pleasures of your life that are simple, freely available, and not dependent on anyone's permission or any act of acquisition. The warmth of the actual sun, a walk. The taste of plain food when you are genuinely hungry. The company of a person you love. Rest when you are tired, your own thoughts. These are the wants that do not chain you, because nothing and no one stands between you and them. The more of your daily contentment you can build out of sunlight, out of the free and the simple and the unconquerable, the fewer threads the world has to pull. And the closer you stand to the strange, ragged, unconquerable freedom of the man in the jar. It would be dishonest to end without naming the hard part. And with Diogenes, the hard part is large, and this channel has already been pointing at it. Diogenes, taken as a literal model, leads somewhere genuinely impoverished. His total philosophy, lived out completely, means no family, no contribution, no creation, no participation, no building of anything. A life that needs no one and therefore very largely gives to no one and loves no one fully. And a human life lived that way is not the highest freedom. It is, in an important sense, a diminished life. The threads that bind us to other people, to those we love, to work that matters, to a community we are responsible for. Those threads are not only chains, they are also, quite simply, where most of the meaning of a human life is found. To cut them all is not to win. It is to forfeit the game in order to stop losing it. So here Diogenes correctly. He is not the destination. He is the corrective. He is the brilliant, deliberate extremist whose entire value is that by going all the way to the edge, he showed the rest of us with total clarity where the chains actually are. His gift is the diagnosis, and the diagnosis is permanently true that wanting is the chain, that a great deal of our wanting is counterfeit, and that every unnecessary want is a thread by which the world can pull us, that insight is real, and you should carry it for the rest of your life. But the prescription, cut every thread, want nothing, withdraw entirely. That prescription was corrected deliberately by the wiser tradition that descended from him. The Stoics kept the diagnosis and changed the cure. Stay in the world, keep your home, your work, your roles. Love the people in your life completely, without reservation. Bind yourself to them gladly. Build things, contribute. belong. But do all of it holding the Diogenes question quietly in your mind. Does this own me? And hold every external thing the way he held his sunlight, as something genuinely good, fully enjoyed, and yet not the foundation of you. Want fewer things, and want them more loosely, and love people more freely for not needing them to complete you. Do not move into the jar, but never forget the man who did. That is the teaching. Everything else is commentary. Diogenes lived to a very great age and died. The sources guess around the year 323 before the Common Era, by a strange coincidence of history, in the same year as Alexander the Great. The conqueror who had offered him the world, and the old man who had asked only for his sunlight back, left the earth. The tradition says, on the same day Alexander died in a palace in Babylon, master of an empire so vast it would shatter the moment he was gone. Diogenes died owning, as he had arranged, almost nothing at all. There is a story that he asked to be thrown out unburied for the animals. One last joke, one last lesson about how little the fate of the body finally matters. And that is why he belongs at the close of this channel's first 10 essays, because Diogenes is the root, and the warning, and the question, all at once. He is the root. The line of teachers runs directly from him, through Crates, to Zeno, and into the whole Stoic tradition we have followed. Marcus, Epictetus, Seneca, Boethius, and forward, even to Frankl. The insight that wanting is the chain begins, for the West, with the man in the jar. He is the warning. His total life shows us that the insight pushed to its literal extreme costs too much, that a life with every thread cut is free of pain, but also emptied of love and meaning and contribution. And he is the question, the permanent, uncomfortable, valuable question that he asked the conqueror and asks us still. How much of what you are chasing do you actually want? And how many of the things you believe you need are simply standing like a conqueror's shadow between you and a sunlight that was always free and always yours and always there. And you do not need to give away your possessions or live in a barrel to use this. You only need to be a person who, in some ordinary hour today, runs the honest audit, who looks at your own wanting and sorts the real coin from the counterfeit. A person who, now and then, deliberately and in small doses, chooses the simple and the plain over the rich and the easy, and learns in their own body how little they truly need. And above all, a person who locates their sunlight, who builds more and more of their daily contentment out of the free and the simple and the unconquerable things, so that fewer and fewer threads remain for the world to pull, and so that when the next conqueror's shadow falls across your life, you can recognize it for exactly what it is, and ask it calmly to step aside. Stone and iron. Thank you for sitting with this one. If essays like this are useful to you, the channel is here for them. Subscribe if you want more.